What's going on, everybody? And for the final time, welcome to Derby Week in episode 76 of Bettin N Boozin here on the HHH Racing Podcast. I am your host, Kyle Roscoe, and a fun final show coming for you guys this evening as we are starting a little bit earlier. We're starting at 5 p.m. here Central Time, of course, in Wisconsin, 6 p.m. on the East Coast. So, again, a little bit early for you guys today, but we're going to cover the all Derby stakes, all Derby Day stakes that are underneath the late pick 5, or as you might know them as the undercard stakes for Saturday. Lots of fun races in this. You have the Turf Sprint, the Knicks Go Overnight, and two more very competitive races to round out this pick 4, which there is a pick 4 for what we're covering today. So if you guys like the opinions, or if we talk about something you like, kind of ticket construction like we talked about last night, you guys feel free to play the pick 4, of course. But guys, real quick going through here, as you guys all know by now, down below the video player, bettinandboozin@gmail.com is the email. Please email me with any questions, comments, or concerns. I will get right back to you. Also, please go down below the video player here on YouTube and please hit the subscribe button. It's the best way to help us out, and it lets you know every single episode of the HHH Racing Podcast that gets posted, but also it pushes that out, and just like the like button, so please go down below and smash that as well. It pushes these videos out into the YouTube algorithm to hopefully get like-minded horse players like yourself over to the HHH Racing Podcast, and for that we thank you. But guys, like I said, please go down below and comment below who are your picks. You can comment a pick 4 ticket, and please either below the video player if you're watching this on a replay or in the live chat. Let's have a discussion. I would love to hear your picks for these early stakes races, considering that they've been out for 4 days. So if you've already done the handicapping, please feel free to put them in the chat. We would love to have a discussion with you guys. But for those of you that know, always Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and Anchor is where you can find these shows in audio form. Not only every episode of Bettin N Boozin, but every single podcast episode on the HHH Racing Podcast gets posted to wherever you find your podcast. Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and Anchor is where we mainly like to stay. Power picks, guys. This is the last day. If you subscribe now, you will get the Kentucky Derby package along with 3 more weeks after the Kentucky Derby, because as everyone knows, racing never sleeps. Patreon.com/HHH Racing Podcast for that. You'll get, again, like I said, the full Derby package. So a lot of these, $50, $75, $100 for these Derby packages, $4 for the weekend, guys. And that's two full days of Kentucky Derby action of every single race, all top 3s from every single co-host for all stakes races, price plays, spot plays, pick 5 grids. Every single thing you need to be successful this Derby weekend is going to be right on the HHH Racing Podcast Power Picks. And again, for only $4 a weekend, one of the most affordable and most profitable tip sheets in all of podcasts. Please go to patreon.com/HHH Racing Podcast for that. The link is also in the description. And if you would like to see previous editions of the Power Picks before you buy them, or you just want to find out more about us, the best place to do that is hhhracingpodcast.com. Guys, like I said, let's get right into this. We're not going to waste any more time. Bringing on my co-host here, and then we'll get into the comments that we see. I see a lot of people already in the live chat. Shout out to everyone who joined early and is posted in the live chat. We'll get to your comments in a second. But first, from the East Coast of New Jersey, Patrick Kunsel. From University of Kentucky, Noah Maher. And from the Ohio State University, Charlie Freeman. Boys, I know, overworked all week. Last show of the week. What's going on, boys?
Well, not all of us. We have some people that haven't been here for all of them, but I'm happy on our last one. We get to have the whole game together. I'm glad. I'm glad that after what happened yesterday, Pat was able to show up. I got to give him a lot of credit. That was a tough one, but he's got the attire, he's locked in, and we got the full crew ready to go.
Matt Miller said in the chat, Knicks go, instead of go Knicks. I think I should have switched that after last night. Well, and for the race that we're covering today too.
That is very true. Go Knicks, Knicks go. I'm surprised I even said the first part of that, because that's not in my repertoire. But boys, like I said, let's get right into the handicapping. But first, we have a lot of people in the chat that we want to give a huge shout out to. Bill Kelly was here at 3:38 p.m., an hour and a half before the show, and he brought up on resilience in the Derby. We talk about all the time how there's differences in time, in time form and buyer figures, all these different speed figures. it's one of the best things that I've picked up as a handicapper in the past, I'd say probably 6 to 8 months, is comparing speed figures to see, where the discrepancies lie and which, speed figures have some races rated higher than others. And you can kind of compare, to your own liking. That's one of the things I picked up. Bill Kelly says there's a big discrepancy between Brisnet and Byers on resilience. So, that's one thing that you guys that I love to take into account, not only when handicapping big races like the Derby, but just in a normal setting as well. Nick Feldman's here. Of course he is. Thanks so much, man, for joining. He says Brisnet always comes back high on the wood, but I think even Timeform was pretty high on that race as well. We'll bring it. They'll bring it up tonight in Picks and Ponies, as I failed to mention before. We're covering the undercard stakes again. That is races 4 through 7 on Saturday's Derby card. That then tune in tonight at 8 p.m. Eastern prime time for Picks and Ponies with Howard, Pete, and Paul going over the late pick 5 for Kentucky Derby Day. So basically today we're covering every single stakes race on Kentucky Derby Saturday. So not a day you guys don't want to miss. And thanks to everyone for being here. Christopher is here, of course. Katie here for the 5th time, part 5. Absolutely. Mike Monroe is here. Let's go, man. Absolutely. Thanks very much for joining the show. Early time for the Boozin boys. Got to clear out for the boss, man. He wanted prime time. We give him prime time. We'll go somewhere else. Ray Cromley is here. Racing Downwind is here. Sylvain is here. Terry Frank, Ed Burke. All of our favorite viewers are all here, coming through and staying with us through the entire week. Can't thank you guys enough for that. But guys, let's get right into this late pick 5. Hopefully we're gonna go under an hour here for you guys. We'll go over the 4 races. We'll give best bets at the end for the entire Derby day. It's not just going to be for these 4 undercard stakes. We feel like it would be doing a disservice for you guys if we just gave best bets for these 4 races that we're talking about. We wanted to since this is our last show before the actual Derby, we wanted to give you guys the best bets for the entirety of Derby Saturday, as we already gave them for Derby Friday. So guys, let's get right into this here. The undercard stakes start in race number 4, not with a graded stake, however, though. They start with a listed stake for $200,000. It is the Knicks Go Stakes. Shout out Matt Miller. The Knicks Go Overnight Stakes, presented by L&N Federal Credit Union. 1 mile, 1-turn mile on the dirt, of course. $200,000, as I said, draws a full field of 11 with the number 6 Best Actor as your morning line favorite. I still shudder every time I hear that name. If you know, you know. That's all I'm going to say to that one. Best Actor, your 5-2 favorite. Your second choice, the number 1 on the inside, Strong Quality, who's coming over from the turf for Florent Giroux and Mark Casse. Third choice is the number 2, Dennington, for BJ Hernandez and Kenny McPeak. Guys, and also shared by the number 7, Capuna, for Bet Mitch Get Rich, Mitchell Murrell, and Brett Calhoun. Boys, let's bring up the picks right
off the tongue. Very good, Kyle. Very well.
Yeah, it does, doesn't it? That's an Arlington staple right there for so many years.
It is.
Mitch Get Rich. Either way, the race 4 Knicks Go Stakes. You'll see we have 4 different horses on top, guys. And I don't know about you, but obviously this is the first time that everyone is seeing that. Besides me, of course, everyone's seeing each other's picks on the screen. I thought this race was the hardest race on the entire weekend. The week, at least Kentucky Derby Day for me. This race is near impossible to really hammer home a winner unless you have a really strong opinion. I'll bring up the time form right now to show the pace scenario. You'll see everybody there. I mean, there's 6 horses within what time form has is like 2 lengths of each other. And then Dennington all the way in the back, who Noah, you have on top first. So I'm going to go to you first, because realistically, you see this pace scenario, you're hoping for a complete meltdown with number 2, Dennington.
Yeah, I mean, on paper, it definitely seems that way. With Dennington, obviously you want the pace set up, but it just seems like, when McPeak brought him back on that Oaklawn Mile, I think that was probably just to get one into him. But now McPeak brings him here, obviously on a big day. A horse that likes to track here at Churchill. His best buyer figure is at this configuration on this track. So obviously with the speed, hopefully BJ doesn't have him too far back. And with all this speed, I feel like he's got to come running late.
Well, and that's the thing is this horse has had plenty of setups before, but he does like them. One thing I will say is his last race at this Churchtown Mile was very good, winning by a length. That was over the fall meet last November. That was that Thanksgiving weekend. He's gonna have pace to run into. I just don't know. I mean, he always gives his run, but it always seems lackluster to me for the number 2 Dennington. Charlie, you also have this horse in second, and we can lead right into your top pick, who Patrick and I also think is pretty interesting.
Yeah, for me, this race, agreed. I think this is arguably the hardest race of the weekend. There isn't really a clear-cut winner, to be honest with you. If you were to play this race vertically, I would not encourage picking one of the favorites just because I don't think there is someone convincing enough. Yeah, literally what Christopher just said is what I was about to add. I think even though I have the 6 on top, I would argue Best Actor is one of the most vulnerable favorites of the weekend. And I wouldn't be surprised if there ends up being not a single horse lower than 3-1 in this race. And you end up having, a bunch, we talk about it, where if you do have a strong opinion, this could be a great race for you because you'll probably find a bunch of horses in like the 3 to 6-1 range. The thing I liked about the 2, I actually almost had this horse on top, which I'm guessing is what Noah kind of also saw. And you showed with the time form is everybody in this race wants to send pretty much, or at least before they placed in a hot pace besides the 2. So the setup should be there. I just don't know if it'll quite get there. The reason I ended up with Best Actor on top ultimately is, I understand obviously you have that bad beat you don't like to talk about, but the reality is the horse is solid. The figures are there, repeatedly running in the mid to high 90s, gets Flavien Prat aboard, which is always nice to have for Cox. And I just kind of think with a race where, again, everybody's going to be pretty much forwardly placed, why not just go with the fastest of those horses? Because there's not many that really have shown the ability to close outside the 2. And so I kind of just wanted to cover myself with my top 2 of having the speed of the speed that could, potentially just wire this field and hold up. Or if the pace melts down, then the horse I have in second is the one who should pick up the pieces.
Yeah, and that's a very sound, we talk about all the time, having best speed and best closer. That's a very sound handicapping strategy. I've loved this horse for a long time and really did bury me in the mud in Fairgrounds in the mine shaft for a Hawthorne contest. For those that don't know, for a Hawthorne contest, I was alive to 3,800 to Best Actor in that race. At 4 to 5, I had completely locked into a double, and I would have been all in on Stay Hot in Santa Anita, and that would have brought me to the winning total of the tournament. So the head was what decided, and the Mudman Money Supply was the one that beat me out. I just think Best Actor is very good, and he's really survived hot paces in the past. So I do have him in third just to cover bases a little bit, but I was looking for an off-the-pace horse myself. Patrick, you actually have this horse in third. This horse is number 8, Strava, is the horse that I have on top with a morning line of 8-1 for Norm Cassidy. IRAD picks up the mounts, so I understand the IRAD tax will be in play here, but I'm not sure how much, Patrick, considering this horse came out of a $75,000 claimer, but it's less the class that I'm looking at and more the running style for Strava. Because in my opinion, Strava might not be the best horse in the race, and maybe by a long shot, but he looks, if he does rate off like he did last time, I think he's going to set a pretty good trip in this spot.
Yeah, I do agree. The last 2 races, going 1 mile, they both were last out, wasn't the hottest of pace. It was pretty slow fractions for the second quarter as well. And that horse, just picked up steam and ran on with it going 3 wide, which I thought was impressive. And Norm Cassie's obviously a solid trainer and has been great so far to start the year. And that's where, I think the number 11 Oscar Eclipse comes into play. This horse is not a need to lead type of horse. I really like the 7 furlong race last out. I just thought, got off a little bit slow and had to deal with a little bit of an issue early on. But for trainer Brian Lynch, this horse, comes out of a race back in September and, pops a 93 buyer, increases pretty decently. And I think in a spot where, prices are to be had, I think from the outside post, this horse can kind of sit back a little bit in that second flight, like it said on time form, and hopefully catch, the leaders dueling, who hopefully the 6 Best Actor, who I do have in second, but kind of concerns me a little bit because that horse kind of needs the lead and hasn't faced, the greatest of competition getting to the lead in a couple of races that it's won.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you by any means. Like I said, I just think Best Actor is probably, and most definitely the speed for me in this race. So if he does take pace pressure early, that's why I'm leaning towards horses like Strava. Christopher brings up a good point in the chat. This horse is 3 for 6 at Churchill on the win end, 4 for 6 in the money. And I just love that he showed the ability to rate last time. And like I said this already, but he might not be the best horse in the race going forward. But just on a complete trip scenario, I think Strava might be getting the best of it at a decent price of 8-1. Last horse I'll talk about, guys, is Capuna, and then we'll move on to race number 5. Capuna for Brett Calhoun, and like I said, Get Rich, Mitchell Murrell ran at Evangeline Downs in the Evangeline Downs Mile last time, beating the number 10 5-star General in that race by 5.5. Got a great set, great trip in that race. But this is another one that shows the ability to rate and the ability to finish. Again, you could say it's Evangeline Downs. You can, maybe he didn't face the best type of competition. Still coming out of that race, facing one of those in here, just to get a complete trip play for me. If the pace does completely melt down, I'm not, as I said before, I'm not the biggest fan of Dennington. So kind of broadening my horizons on who's going to be able to rate and fly late. That number 8 Strava, my top pick, number 7 Capuna, look to pick up the pieces and get jumps on the horse like Dennington. Let's move on, guys, to race number 5. I'm going 8-7-6. Patrick's going 11-6-8. Charlie's going 6-2-1, and Noah's going 2-7-11. Guys, moving over to race number 5, that is the Turf Sprint Stakes, and going 5.5 furlongs, of course, on the Churchill turf. The rails have been out. I'm assuming they're going to be down for tomorrow. Again, that's just complete guesswork. It is going to rain on Friday. This is the first time and probably the only time I'll mention weather, so I don't piss off Paul when he watches this replay.
Leave that for the weathermen tonight.
Yeah, and it's 70% chance, but when I looked, it was light rain and maybe possibly thunderstorms in the afternoon. It seems very scattered, so it might rain a lot. It might not. Honestly, that doesn't look like the Weather Channel is very sure either. So obviously keep an eye on that, and that could play a role into your handicapping. But for right now, it looks completely dry on Saturday. So race number 5, the Turf Sprint Stakes. You'll see 2 of us, Charlie, very astute numbers, my friend, are going with the number 10, Big Invasion, and 2 of us are going with the number 4, Motorious, as I bring up the picks right now. You see a field of 14 with 3 also eligibles in this field. Charlie and I are both going to number 10, Big Invasion, at 5-1. The morning line favorite is the number 4, Motorious, coming back off of the Breeders' Cup for Flavian Pratt, picking up for Phil D'Amato. And second choice will be the number 8, Mischief Magic, Dettori taking the mount for Appleby. Patrick, I'm going to start with you, and then Noah, feel free to add on anything you want. I have absolutely nothing against Motorious. Noah, you and I were on this horse a lot in the Breeders' Cup race, not thinking he would actually go off as the favorite, being 5-1, I believe, like third choice morning line, and he ended up going off as the favorite. There's nothing really too much. I mean, he's very talented. He shows a lot of closing power at these short distances, Pat.
Yeah, and I actually looked back at my DRF notes to when I had this horse last year in this same race, going into this same race, I should say, and I just talked about how well it ran out in Santa Anita, on the down the hill races, and just looked to be like in a primetime spot at 4-1 in the turf sprint, and ran huge, but got beat by No Balls that day, who I'm pretty sure was a big price if I could remember correctly. A wicked pace, and now gets a layoff, wins at Del Mar, and comes back in the turf sprint and gets an awful trip. So now he comes to today with another layoff, and I think in this spot, trainer Phil D'Amato has put this horse in a spot where if this horse can just get the right trip, seems to like Churchill Downs. I'm expecting a big race, Noah.
Yeah, I agree. It's interesting because Phil D'Amato this is a horse that doesn't necessarily need one. D'Amato's perfectly content to kind of build him up and get him into the spot that he thinks is right for this horse. If you want to talk about a late kick, I mean, he's got a wicked late kick. He's shown that, showed that 2 back in the Green Flash. And then, like you said, Pat, in the turf sprint this time last year, if No Balls kind of doesn't run him off his feet or off their feet, I think Motorious kind of just runs away with it. I mean, he was closing well in that race too. And actually in the Breeders' Cup turf sprint, he did break slow, had a little trouble. I don't know if Pratt envisioned kind of being in last. Granted, there was a lot of speed. They went 21 flat for the first quarter. But just if you're going to bank on somebody in a tough race like a turf sprint, especially with this, type of talent in the field, I think Motorius is definitely one to back.
Yeah, Motorius is here, the number 10 in the pink right here, and Big Invasion is the number 1, the horse that Charlie and I have on top. Charlie, let you talk through this. Big Invasion was 12-1 in this race, which I'll pause it here at the top of the stretch, which I thought was pretty damn disrespectful for a very good horse in this race. Ended up running with an absolute kick for second behind No Balls right here. You see in the Patricia's Hope teal and black. And friendly reminder from the boss man himself, No Balls has no balls. No Balls is a gelding, which is why it's a fantastic, it's a fantastic name, of course, trained by Midwest guy Larry Ravelli. I'll play it through, Charlie. See, he's kind of stuck inside, has nowhere to go right here, and he's still going to come with a very strong kick following No Balls.
Yeah, Big Invasion is just one of those horses who closes like a freight train, which again, people like me and Peta on this show who love closers, it's always cool when even in a horse that does primarily turf sprints only can still be that kind of closer that you look for. But the reality is Big Invasion isn't like, your typical closer where it's like, oh, but this horse has no early speed. Like the horse absolutely has enough early speed to be, right in the thick of things and still not have too much work to do. But I will say getting, this extra little bit of distance, I think will help. But it's like you said, the reality that's kind of been unfortunate for Big Invasion has just been not always getting the easiest trips, or that 5 furlongs has just caught up to him too quick and there just hasn't been enough distance to work with. So I kind of feel like this 5.5 is exactly what Big Invasion wants and needs. Hoping for a better trip. And I also I don't mind, honestly, the 10 post. I think, it might make, obviously then you don't have to worry about as much potentially getting slammed on the rail. I think this horse can sit a nice stalking trip because I don't think the speed is too crazy in this race. And I don't know, I think kind of getting that nice stalking trip and the extra little bit of distance. I'm curious what you think, Kyle, but for me, I just think this is kind of exactly what this horse has been looking for and needs.
I agree. I love the extra half. Like I said, he won it. Woodbine on the yielding turf at 6, ran very well at Saratoga last year at 5.5. They took him out to Ascot, didn't run very well in the Queen Elizabeth II Jubilee, but still he's a mainstay at the Jaipur at Belmont at 6th. Point being, I really think he has a big shot to close very well into what looks like a hot pace on paper. That 102 in the Breeders' Cup Turf Sprint comes back at Gulfstream Park. Very hard to close on at Gulfstream, as we all know, on that turf course, especially at 5.5. And even if it starts, with the weather and whatever, I think he benefits from firm, benefits from soft. I think he can run on anything. I love Big Invasion on this spot, and I think he might get disrespected again on the price with horses like Motorius and the number 8 Mischief Magic, who we'll talk about. No, sorry, Pat, I'll throw it back to you here. And then Noah, I want you to talk about why you don't have this horse in here and why you like your others. And that because Pat, a lot of us are very similar in this race. So Appleby brings this horse over here for the juvenile turf sprint in 22, keeps him over in England for his full 3-year-old campaign. Started the 4-year-old campaign, goes to the Middle East, and now back to Keeneland in the Shakertown and ran very well behind a very good horse in Arzak. Keeping in the States, what do you like most about Mischief Magic?
Yeah, Mischief Magic, seemed to, in the Shakertown just kind of run it very easily without Tyler really asking too much in the stretch to get up for second. It was kind of bizarre. It seemed like they were expecting the race to be a little bit longer. I didn't really understand that. But the fractions in that race were incredibly fast. So that could have been what paid for that. But the horse did have to go really wide in the stretch to get out. Was not really a factor that day to Arzak. The thing that concerns me is distance. If this horse can, get to 5.5, like it did in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile at 2, this horse could be tough. And I'd watch the board with this horse because if it's being bet, this horse could be really tough.
Yeah, and I'll bring up the time form right here to kind of give you guys an opportunity to see the speed here. And it's right here. They have the 3, 9, 11 all vying for this lead between Bad Beat Brian, Coppola I believe, and Mr. So there's a lot of horses that have this, over 100 speed figure. Rest Me Red's not slow. Cogburn only has a 98. Fleo D'Arania is on a 99. So Mustache with 104. So there's no like 130 absolute speed balls in here, but I think there's enough speed to be able to get horses home like Big Invasion, who might sit a little bit closer, or Motorius, who might, sit in that mid-flight pack. I think those are the horses where I'm really keying in on today. Noah, I'll give you last talk here. Mustache, you and Patrick both have this horse underneath, and I know this is a horse that you really feel good on this Saturday. Is this pace play for you, or do you? I know second time off the layoff. Where's this kind of angle for you with Mustache?
Well, I think this race is a little strange on paper because there's a decent amount of horses that have some quick early foot, but there isn't necessarily anybody that wants to be on the lead. I guess you could make the case for Mr. But in terms of that, kind of going through the field, I was looking for some horses that I think will probably be just off the speed or maybe mid-pack, which is a little bit why I wasn't a huge fan of Mystic Magic, because I think if some horses kind of get the jump on him, he's really up against it, and at that price, not necessarily one that I would want to take.
Right.
Going back to Mustache, he pretty much danced every dance as a 3-year-old. It was going long, going 2 turns on the turf, but he comes back. He had a freshener on the 5th of April at Keeneland. He had been off since early September before that. Pops a decent 92. Got a pretty good trip, did it professionally. It wasn't really anything, super thrilling or nothing too wrong. It was a pretty decent effort. This is the second start of the 4-year-old campaign. Like I said, he had some nice races as a 3-year-old, and I could realistically seeing him kind of jump maybe 5, 6, maybe even 8 points on the buyer scale. And I think something like that, especially at a big price, puts him right into it.
Well, and you see he has races before at the sprinting distance too. You see these races back in 22 at 5.5 at both Ellis and Keeneland. Both of those are very good races. Back then, that was the Indian Summer of 22. Now cuts back because, we all know 6.5 at Kentucky Downs is more, plays longer with all the hills down in Franklin, Kentucky. So 6.5 at Kentucky Downs, I don't count it really as a sprint, but then comes back 5.5 at Keeneland, runs an absolute bang-up race, albeit with a pretty decent trip, going semi-decent fractions. So if he can continue to get that trip, I think Mustache might be interesting at a big number. But like you said, Noah, there's not necessarily anyone that's going to get to the lead that want, like I said, any speed balls in this race. But I still think it's going to be, pretty honest fractions going in here. But Mustache has dealt with them before. You see in the American Turf just lost by 1.5, but granted, again, that's a routing distance. So he still had to deal with these, decent paces on his running line. So Mustache could definitely be one to include underneath at a big price. I'm going 10-4-8. Patrick's going 4-8-5. Charlie's going 10-4-8, and Noah's going 4-5-14. 2 horses I want to talk about. Cogburn, real quick. Noah, you have this horse in third. This is one that showed a lot of speed in the past on the dirt. Has really rated all on the turf, but definitely could be one to be forwardly placed. Is just going to have to navigate that 14 hole, which could be a pretty big task. But he has IRAD, long run up to that turn, of course, running 5.5 at Churchill. So should be able to slot in pretty well, but is going to have to run a pretty big race from the 14 hole to be able to get it done on the win end. Pete brings up Eamon. Where is this comment? He said, oh no, that's the Motorius comment. He says, don't sleep on Eamon to hit the board. Not my pick, but definitely underneath at a price. Another one that's going to run, do a lot of running late, has been down at Gulfstream. And again, we talked about it already. It's decently harder to close on that track. Closed twice for third. And went to the Shakertown and was only a length behind Arzak and just lost out second to Mischief Magic. So Eamon could definitely be one to pick up the pieces at another nice price of 12-1. And I saw some Coppola love in the chat, which I believe is the number 3, correct? Yes, it is. So another one that doesn't necessarily need the lead by any means, but if the lead's there, I think Coppola is going to be able to take it. Dale Romans does his best running at Churchill. Martin Garcia picks up the mount as he usually always does for Dale Romans. Could be one to, again, steal it on the front end with the horses like Mustache, but they're going to have to work out the trip. And I think there might be a little more pace on than what's seen on paper. What was Motorius was the D'Amato horse. Pete brought up a good stat, and I'll bring it up here. At Churchill Downs in the last 5 years, I believe it's like it's five for 94 in the last 5 years for D'Amato shipping to Churchill Downs. And we talk about it all the time in East Coast versus West Coast turf horses. That could be something to keep in mind as I know, West Coast bias, you be quiet for 2 seconds, cover your ears. But 5 for 94 is, I mean, that's a stat that people, you need to at least take into consideration. But it is notorious. He's very, very talented. So obviously stats don't tell the big thing, to the big picture, but it's definitely something to keep in mind. Guys, let's move on to race number 6, which is the Derby City Distaff. And someone brought up a good point. There's a lot of, like interleague duels here between a lot of these horses. You have, in this race, it's Alva Star versus Vava. And I think it's going to be a very, very good race. As I bring up the picks right now, you'll see 3 of us are going with the number 10 Vava, while Noah is sticking to his roots. Both of us loved Alva Star last time, and he's going to stick to his guns, going with the number 7 Alva Star. And as I bring up the Equibase right now, it's a field of 10 going 7 furlongs for fillies and mares 4 years old and up for $1 million. The morning line favorite is the number 7 Alva Star. Gaffleone takes the mount at 5-2. Vava on the outside. Irad for Cherie DeVoe at 3-1. Your third choice will be the number 9 Red Carpet Ready for Luis Saez and Rusty Arnold. Guys, switching over to the PPs right now. Noah, you have the privilege of going first and to tell us why we're all going to be wrong with Vava and why Alva Star is going to do it again.
Well, first off, in the Madison, before that race, she seemed a little bit one-dimensional. She seemed like she pretty much damn near needed to be on the lead. But last time in the Madison, she showed a little bit of a different dimension. And, that's not necessarily her forte. But the way that she did it, I just think she kind of just showed her class last time. That was off the bench for a little while. But she had done it before, and it wasn't a huge number, but she got it done in the American Beauty at Oakland on the slop. But I just think coming back to this spot, there's going to be a lot of people backing Vava just because she was really closing late. I think if you dive deeper and you watch the replay, I don't think Vava was ever going by. I think Alva Star kind of got a good look at her, and once they got into the gallop out, Alva Star just said, "No, you're not going to go by me."
So you guys can see right here, they're bunched up for the lead. The number 8, I believe, is Vava, if I remember correctly. And the number 6 here is Alva Star. So, Vava's spotting her a few lengths. And the one thing, Noah, that I will push back on is this was off of a pretty decent layoff for Vava, and this will be second off the layoff, if I remember correctly. Mm-hmm. So that'll be the one thing that I'm looking for her to continue to improve in her 4-year-old year. But, I mean, look, you and I, like we talked about, I singled Alva Star in doubles that day. You had her pretty heavy as well. And she never really shown this type of, stalking, being able to rate trip, but she did it very well that day at Keeneland. And obviously we watched it all live. This was a very good race from her.
Yeah, it was. You can see that the 2 that she had just passed at the top of the stretch is Red Carpet Ready.
Yep.
Who I think on the time form doesn't necessarily have the same speed as Vava, but in the Madison, Saez was content to kind of go with Red Carpet Ready. And as they pass the 16th pole, Vava gets a little close, gets a little weary, but Alva Star is able to hang on. And then will take us into the I'm just going to show the gallop out. But it's
you're going to show the gallop out? Sorry. But I know what you're getting at. Alva Star was staying in front the whole way through as well.
Yeah.
So, like I said, I'm a big Alva Star fan. I think that last race in the Madison was very good. But me and the rest of the boys are going to go with number 10, Vava. Charlie, I'll throw it to you first. She's one of those tactical horses that she always makes herself into what looks like a good trip. And in a race, I'll show the time form as well. In a race where it has hot pace, but it has 2 horses going for the lead. That's number 5, Spirit Wind, who looks like a dead send leader, I believe, for Safi Joseph, if I remember correctly. My memory's not that bad. With blinkers on as well, she definitely looks to fly to the front. Alva Star should be tracking right behind her. Vava's going to set a pretty nice trip, and it says in behind, like most likely second flight. Charlie, again, throwing it to you. I just think she's very talented, and second off the layoff could be the key for the number 10 Vava.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, for starters, the only thing I slightly disagree with the pace projection is I feel like Red Carpet Ready will definitely be a part of that first flight. I feel like all the source really knows is either being on the lead or being, half a length off. So and also you can kind of count on any race that Red Carpet Ready's on, especially with Luis aboard, there's going to have to be pace because of that horse alone. But no, I agree with you. I think Vava can sit a nice stalking trip, probably, 2-3 lengths off the lead right behind them in a decently lively pace. And yeah, like you touched on, I mean, I understand that the 7 was obviously on a slight bit of a layoff, but nothing too significant. But Vava was on a pretty massive layoff after popping a career number. I think there were a lot of questions about this horse last time out. Obviously, coming back off the layoff, how will this horse respond? But I think more importantly, was that 101 fraudulent, or is this horse actually, progressing and taking a nice step? And for me to see the horse then pop a 99 off that big of a layoff for me shows that Vava is a horse that is improving despite being a fairly experienced 4-year-old, and I think is going to continue to improve. And like you said, I think between that constant improvement and being able to sit a trip, could win this race. But I also completely see where Noah's going for, and that's the big X factor for me about why I think the 7 is still so threatening in a 2-horse race, was because of that ability to show that horse is not a need for lead kind of horse.
Yeah, and Pat, I'm gonna also 2 for 2 at Churchill is Vava, running in one optional $100,000 claimer last year with beating Undervalued Asset, who was a pretty good horse last year. And that was on Derby Day last year, or Oaks Day last year, one of the two, if I remember correctly. And then back, she broke her maiden at Churchill Downs as well. So 2 for 2 over the track obviously never hurts as well.
Yeah, no, never hurts. Red Carpet Ready's 3 for 3. You guys hit on pretty much everything with Vava. The one thing, that I just kind of came in my head, this matchup kind of reminds me of the male version of Elite Power versus Gannett. Those two, we would always, debate, tactics wise and stuff like that. If Gannett would get the jump on Elite Power, I wonder who's going to play the cards in this race of, maybe limiting Alvastar, to the lead and, setting quick fractions, because like Charlie said, and then to agree with Noah, who knows if Vava really was going to pass Alvastar that day.
Yeah, and obviously I'll talk about Red Carpet Ready as well, and we'll give quick like you guys have the one underneath, so we'll give a quick one here before we move on. Red Carpet Ready, I don't think Red Carpet Ready's in need the lead type by any means. Is 3 for 3 at Churchill, which C32 did put up in the chat. 3 for 3 over the track. Broke her maiden by 10 early at 37-1, by the way. So that's the time to get Red Carpet Ready. That was over the slop. In the Fern Creek, ended up winning, and then came back in the 8 Bells last year, ended up winning by a head. Hasn't necessarily been, Ted did run a very good race at Gulfstream, just wasn't enough for both Alvastar and Vava last time out. I think she'll be up close, which does probably bode well for her. I just don't know if she's as good as the other two that we've mentioned already. I think she's definitely one to include in your exotics if you're looking, if you're not looking to not get beat in the underneath portions. But for me, I just don't see a race where if she's going to sit the same strip as Alvastar and Vava, if she's going to be better than those going forward or this time in general. I could be completely wrong. She's a very good, talented filly, but I'm looking at other places with the 7 and the 10. Guys, the number 1, 3 Witches. There's been love in the chat for her. Charlie, I'll give it to you, and Pat, if you want to add anything, and after he says it. A horse coming over from Santa Anita, but did run at Gulfstream last year all throughout the summer for Safi. Michael McCarthy picks up the training, ended up winning the Santa Monica, now brings her over here.
Yeah, the one thing I'll say real quick about Red Carpet Ready, because that was a horse I was debating about putting third, is the one thing you do have to respect is that horse always runs its race. You saw has like 5 wins out of 8 starts, and then is also in the money in 2 of them. So you certainly have to respect the horse. But like you said, my main concern is there is pace, and that ultimately, especially the issue we saw last time out, really with the 7 being able to now sit off the paces. I don't really know the method of victory that Red Carpet Ready has to victory. Again, underneath certainly, but the big concern would be, like you said, that 5 is going to send like hell and press the horse. People in the chat have been talking about other horses in this race also pressing the speed. And now that you know that the 10 for sure will be able to sit right off, and the 7 has shown a little ability to, I just don't see an easy path to victory. 3 Witches, I think, is very interesting just because I feel like we got to see, a different side of this horse last time out with another step forward and a career eye buyer, because we've seen efforts, obviously, of the horse being able to stalk off the pace and then make moves. But we've never really seen the horse properly, press and be right behind the speed and then be able to get that kind of first jump ahead of the stalkers, but, get by the speed that sets the tone. And it was a nice win going away, gets Pratt aboard, which I'm sure Pat also keyed in on. Is certainly nice to have again. And Pat, I'm curious if you kind of saw the same thing as me, but I just think the one thing that could make this horse dangerous, at the very least, to use underneath, was that ability to show more of a pressing trip. Because if this horse gets the jump on, Red Carpet Ready or the 5 horse, could very well make the 7 and 10 have to work a little to go by.
Yeah, and I also like the inside post for 3 Witches. I think that she's been pretty much posted outside for most of her races. Watching some of them, I think she'll appreciate saving some ground. And I agree with Mike in the chat. You kind of have to use both the 7 and the 10. So the reverse tri-key could come into play here, where you're safe with the 7 and 10, and try and get the one underneath in tries and supers. So this is going to be a really fun race, and I'm excited that we got to cover it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I just want to give a quick shout out. A lot of people that have been watching the podcast for a long time who've come back. For Charles B is here. Charles, thanks so much, man, for joining the show again. Greatly appreciate it. Dewey Fan is here. He likes Flying Connection to hit the board at big odds. Flying Connection was the one that ran in the Apple Blossom last time, was a very good second behind no one was catching at Dare Manor that day. So definitely could be one to play at double-digit odds. But Dewey, thanks again for joining the show. And then to a new name, Bedri, thanks so much for joining the show. Greatly appreciate it. Said the Bears' best bet is Vava and all day for the card. So Chris Felica, I'm assuming is who you're talking about with the Bear, has the number 10 Vava as his best bet of the entire day, which might be thinking on the same wavelength as someone on this screen. But guys, I'm going 10-7-9. Patrick's going 10-7-1. Charlie's also going 10-7-1, and Noah's going 7-10-8. Guys, switching over to the last race that we're going to cover for you guys. The last race in this middle pick 4 is the number 7, the Churchill Distaff Turf Mile Stakes. Draws a full field of 12. And as I bring up the Equibase and our picks right now, the morning line favorite is number 3, Chili Flag, one of Charlie's favorite horses for Irad and Chad. The number 11, I'm assuming it's Capiche for Frankie Dettori and Chad Brown, coming over from England to run in this race here. There's the Equibase for you guys at 5-1, shared by the number 1 AG Bullet for Baltus and Junior Alvarado. Although AG Bullet is cross-entered along with the number 8 Heavenly Sunday, so that's something to keep in mind. I actually think they'll both go in the race on Friday, but obviously keep an eye on your programs for that day to see which races they go in. Guys, switching over the picks right now, and we got three Capiches and 1 outlier. Of course, it's Charlie, as I mentioned. Chili Flag, Chad Brown, Irad Ortiz. I mean, there's not too much to say, although she ran a very, very good Honey Fox last time.
Yeah, I was gonna say, to ask people in the chat how it would do for me sometimes when we see a Wesley Ward horse run, to see should we guess if I have the Wesley Ward horse. Well, you could have taken it to the bank right away that I was gonna have Chili Flag on top. Look, I'm just gonna ride this horse till the wheels fall off for me. Honestly, I loved this. I was really impressed with the horse's effort in Aqueduct. It was a horse that I decided to use in my underneaths at a huge price in Gulfstream in the Pakistan. And the horse just got unlucky, quite honestly. If you end up going back to watch that trip, I highly recommend our viewers to do so. The horse got a very unlucky trip in the stretch, kept getting checked and just couldn't show anything. And I mean, to only lose by 2 lengths in a field of that quality after all that spoke volumes to me. And I kind of just thought, if this horse gets the chance next time out, will, prove just how dominant and capable this horse really is. And then ends up winning. Obviously, unfortunately, went off as a lot lower of a favorite than I expected, but got the job done. I also do agree. I saw someone in the chat say something about Walkathon. That's absolutely a horse that I will be mixing in underneath in my tries and exactas, even though the horse isn't in my top 3. But I love the spot for Chili Flag. This is one of my plays of the day for sure. Bias aside, I genuinely love this spot for this horse. I trust Chad Brown completely. I also love that Irad is back aboard again. I think they know this is the right spot. The horse is working solidly. I don't know. When I was looking through this field, I really genuinely tried to avoid picking this horse so I wouldn't come off as biased, but I couldn't. I mean, with these races, obviously it's not about crossing off the bad horses like we've sometimes had to do because they're all so damn talented. It's sometimes that you have to look for some flaws to find a reason to knock other horses, and I just couldn't find one. I think the 3 personally will be a little more forward than what Timeform's showing. I think maybe like just ahead of the 2 and 12, but I think this horse will set a perfect stalking trip and has all the ability to go by it. I think even though it's not the easiest trip to navigate, that if anybody can do it, it's Irad.
And Noah, I mean, you have this horse in third, so you also think she's live in this spot. Timeform has this listed as a fast pace with the number 9 in front, not so close. But the difference is that the 8 is Heavenly Sunday and the number 1 is AG Bullet. So you have these 2 horses that might be scratching out of this race to run in other places, which could leave the 9 pretty out there. Albeit, though, I think she's still going to go pretty fast. And Nick Feldman brings up a good point that Rispoli's on AG Bullet in the Sprint Friday, but isn't in this race. My guess is AG Bullet goes to the Sprint Fridays. That's who has been riding her out on the West Coast. Great point, Nick. Thanks for bringing that up. But Noah, again, I think that's something to keep in mind is even though you see fast pace, there's 2 horses that might not even go in this spot.
Yeah, I mean, if you take those 2 horses out of the complexion, it could completely change. Regardless of that, I think the pace would still at least be a little bit honest. So it looks like in the chat, Christopher was a little worried if there wasn't going to be enough pace for Chili Flag. My worry for Chili Flag is if she's good enough. She is starting to get better as she gets older. Her last couple of races, granted, the Pegasus Filling Mare Turf was a very talented field. But I don't really know how good that Honey Fox field was. And some of her races before that, Tass is an okay horse. I just don't know if she necessarily classes up. You get Irad, so you know Chili Flag's probably going to get bet in this spot. And I just think compared to the Honey Fox, this is a much better field than that day.
I don't disagree with you by any means. And that's why that's part of the reason why all 3 of us, I'm sure, are going with the number 11 Capiche for Chad and Frankie Dettori takes the mount. Of course, having ridden her before in England, that was a no-brainer, I'm sure, for Chad as Frankie's over here to ride the entire weekend. Patrick, I'm going to go to you first with this horse, and I want to bring up one stat because she has been off since October, and that was in the Sun Chariot, losing to horses, I don't know, maybe in Spiral, if anyone's heard that name before. Just a ton of talented horses this horse has been running against in England and now comes over for Chad. But this stat is something I wanted to point out and talk about here. So foreign shippers, Chad coming over from England, over 100 and over a 6-month layoff with these horses, guys. 14 for 54. How about 26% with foreign shippers off a layoff? I know it's Chad, so you would expect that stat to be high. That's still pretty damn good.
Yeah, and if the pace and works have been really good, has been working with Chad's monsters, a couple of which are going to be in the Turf Classic. This horse is really meant to run well. And I think it's kind of interesting that, he's got 2 other horses in this race, one of which, Chili Flag, she's, kind of on the tier below. So it's kind of like a little game you look at, and the odds are going to tell you, how good this horse is going to run on Saturday. But, Capiche, I'm just going to kind of go off the form, obviously, what's going on overseas, and hope, she sits a stalking trip and has that wicked turn of foot in the stretch to catch Evie Jets, who I think is going to be on the lead. And who's a really cool story for the Cantermachi barn, who's faced, some pretty heavyweights in the Chad Brown barn in years past.
And no, I'll go to you, and then I'm going to bring up something with Capiche. But since we're on Evie Jets, I want to talk about here now. Another one coming off the layoff from last year's First Lady, although she ran a very nice race in that to only lose to Gina Romantica and in Italian, 2 horses a lot of people might have heard of before after winning at Saratoga in the Blast Spa over Fluffy Socks and others. Evie Jets, I just think could be one to sit a little bit closer than both Chili Flag and Capiche to be able to get a little bit of a jump on them.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think my thought in this race, off of my top 2, I'm kind of going with the horses that we haven't seen for a little while. So somebody that could maybe, run a big race off a big break. With Heavy Jets, obviously the question is if she's ready. But like you said, she's got, these really good races on the lead and sitting off. So she's versatile, and I think it's very hard to leave her off of a ticket, especially in these very difficult turf races. I will say, going back to Capiche before you comment on Capiche, the thing I like with her is obviously she's getting better as she gets older, but it seems like some of her better races are on firm turf.
Yes.
So as long as it doesn't rain, I think, granted, coming from overseas, the turf there is the turf overseas is a little less, naturally less, firm than out here in the States. And I think the mile should hit her right between the eyes. So yeah, Sky, you're very astute.
That's damn right I am. I mean, I'm the one that employs all of you, so of course I'm in. No, I'm not. That's I can't even say that with a straight face. There's one thing though that I wanted to ask, and of course Patrick can jump on this as well. As Charles B says, tough ask for the 11 off the layoff and the outside post. It's not the longest run up to the first turn. They're over halfway, down the stretch to start this race at a mile at Churchill. But she's going to have to navigate from out there. But if there's one, this horse is going to drop back in any way, in my opinion. And if there's anyone I want piloting from the outside in the turf race, it's probably Frankie Dettori.
Yeah, and Dettori's been on her before.
Correct.
Overseas.
For winning rides.
So,
by the way.
Exactly. Yeah. So, I mean, you're going to get somebody that's very familiar. And, if she's able to, break decent, Dettori should be able to kind of tuck over and save ground just because the run into the first turn is not too far.
I completely agree with you. Charlie, last thing we want to talk about is the last Chad in this race. You have Pete Visco in the chat, obviously from Picks and Ponies, saying that he has a Chad 1, 2, 3 in this race. This is the last. This is the other Chad, I guess, in this race. Tyler takes the mount off for good races at Fairgrounds, but definitely going to have to improve. But for a Chad horse, that's not out of the realm of possibility by any means.
Absolutely. The two things I kind of keyed in on that I've seen people talk about in the chat as well is, number one, this is a very fresh and lightly run 4-year-old, so there's certainly plenty of room for improvement. The second thing I think, quite honestly, is I've seen people talk about this before with certain horses where, their buy figures. I've seen a lot actually with domestic product where it's not entirely the horse's fault the figures are so low, and that part of it is just happening to run against some, slower paces and lower competition. You can only show so much. Like obviously this horse, after running in 2 maiden races, ran at an optional claiming 25 at Gulfstream before finally getting to run in a proper stakes race. The thing that I really keyed in on, and if you could show again, like the pace projection, Kyle, real quick. The thing that I really keyed in on, that I think I saw at least one person talk about maybe in the chat, is I just think this 6 could sit a dream trip. I really do think so. I mean, even if you have those scratches come out, then let's say the 7 decides to send a little bit harder. This 6 will probably get a stalking trip and get the first jump ahead of the 11, ahead of the 3 that I like, and some of these other contenders. And so I think realistically, if this full sending speed that we don't realistically think will actually win, but will likely set the tone, I don't think it's completely out of their own possibilities. Like, how Noah was talking about looking for some of these horses that we haven't seen in a while taking a big jump. I don't see why a lightly raced 4-year-old who's going to get the first jump over everyone after the early speed eventually fades, other than obviously the 7 could theoretically hold up. I don't see why the 6 couldn't take advantage of this spot and take a huge step forward. And the other thing I think is, again, Chad isn't really someone who likes to, send in sacrificial lambs and throw in a horse that he thinks has absolutely no shot at all, especially if it's one that Tyler G's getting aboard. So for me, that's another thing that kind of indicates that he thinks, look, this horse is young, even though the horse is 4, is inexperienced, has the chance to step up. And again, I just think it's a beautiful potential setup and could get a great spot in this race.
Yeah, I don't think Ross, I think your point's very very well taken. I don't think they're going to go off that low. I think there's a lot of different ways you can go in this spot for maybe like a 2-1. I think maybe like 5-2, 7-2 is who you'll see in here. And I think Chili Flag could get bet, but Capiche obviously get bet as well. But off the layoff, I think you might still get a pretty decent price in this race. I'm hoping I think Capiche might go off 7-2. I think is what I said earlier, boys, if I remember correctly. And Chili Flag either 3-1 or 5-2. That was my guess. I could be completely wrong. And the last horse, Voshan, brings up a good point. Said no love for Kyle Consort. I mean, this horse really hasn't done anything wrong. I just think she might be a step below some of these horses. You see a lot of you see the high 80s, but that was 10th behind Didia. Did have Ryan Moore aboard in that race. but just seems 86, 84 when you got other horses running 95s, 94s in this race. I just think Cairo Concert might be a little bit of a step below, but definitely could be one underneath to round out your exotics if you're looking for someone underneath. I don't mind that whatsoever, but on the win end for me might just be a cut below. I'm gonna go.
I was going to say one more thing on Cairo Consort. Real quick, just as someone who, when this horse ran last time out, was all over. I think that was the market segmentation race, correct? Where that horse was like a heavy favorite. And I was all over Cairo Consort. Was my top pick after a horse I had repeatedly sort of faded. They tried extending this horse out. For me, my main concern, Kyle, I think you nailed it on the head. I think this is absolutely a play because this horse does run such consistent figures. If you're looking for a horse at a decent price underneath, I absolutely would use Cairo Consort in my, trifectas and superfectas. My big thing that I'm keying in on is just the level of competition and the distance. I just think it's a little too short for this horse, and I think the competition's a little too strong to reasonably expect this horse to actually win. But again, if this is a horse that you're looking at, and just because none of us have in our top threes or thinking, could this horse finish in the money, at least I absolutely think this is a horse to look at for third and fourth. I just think the lack of distance and ability would be a little tough to trust this one to actually get up for the win.
Yep, and I completely agree with you, but definitely one, if you want to key in someone at a decent price underneath, Cairo Concert could be that horse for you. Also, the boss is putting in polls in the chat, guys. Right, we don't have much left in this show, of course, but there's a poll in the chat saying, how much money do you plan on betting this weekend at Churchill? And being that we're going to be there, it might be a little hard to curb this.
I'll just say an irresponsible amount.
No. We're always responsible. Also, thank you, Sylvain, for the kind words. Really appreciate this. Picking horses is easy, but the way you guys explain your opinion is the best. Like I said, Sylvain, I greatly appreciate the kind words, as does everybody on the screen. Guys, just under an hour here and 305 people watching live. Thank you guys all so much for joining in. If you guys are here on YouTube, please go down below the video player and please hit the like button. It really helps us out and is the best and easiest way to support our channel. Hit subscribe because after the Derby, racing still goes on. So please, we cover sequences every single Wednesday for Bettin N Boozin and every single Thursday for Picks and Ponies. So please go onto YouTube, which is our main source, and hit subscribe as well. We would greatly appreciate it. And comment below who you like. I mean, it could be all of Derby Day on this show. So please comment your best bet on Derby Day. We would love to hear it. And of course, like I said at the top of the show, we respond to every one. So guys, let's go over best bets. And like I said at the top of the show, I feel like it would be a little bit of a disservice to just give our best bets for just this sequence, since this is our last show for the entirety of the Derby season. I want to give our best bets for the entirety of Saturday. So that's what we're going to give you guys. And like I said, I felt like that was the best way to go about it. So you're going to see best bets of races outside of the pick five, but we've already done them, so we might as well give them to you guys. So Patrick, you're going to go first, my friend. Race number 3, starting a pick 3, singling the 11 in that race. And I'm pulling it up right now. It is the number 11 Mindframe, who had that massive race, winning by almost 14 lengths down at Gulfstream, breaking his maiden, then going 6-11 in race number 4, which is the Knicks Go. That is the number 6 Best Actor, and the number 11 Oscar Eclipse, who we actually did, or no, so you did talk about Oscar Eclipse with 4-5-8 in the turf sprint. That is Motorious, Mustache, even Mustache in there making an appearance, and Mischief Magic. If you got some prices in there, Pat, that could definitely pay. And of course, sorry, I meant to race number 11, a win on the number 5 Program Trading.
Yeah, sorry to cut you off. I'm going to key Mindframe. I think that horse, is ultra impressive. It's at the Buyer shows. First throwing up an 103 Buyer and winning by 13 lengths. And I think we'll appreciate more distance. And then, I'm just going to try and I have Best Actor and Oscar Eclipse, a price in there. If, I'm going to press up with Best Actor if I have to, as well as Motorious in the 5th race. I'll probably play a straight pick 3 there, and then add in my longer shots in the 5 Mustache and in the 8. And then in the Turf Classic, I've been following Program Trading for a while now. That horse has just been, visually impressive to me. When it comes to speed figure wise, yes, I do think the horse is going to have to improve a little bit more. just looking at it, but the way the horses won and, where Chad's placed his horse in races, like this is the typical Chad, monster, having the horse break its maiden at Monmouth, right before the summertime, then goes to Belmont and, gets that allowance race and then can go to Saratoga in a big grade 1. And I just think this horse has been working really well, is going to be off a layoff and is going to run a big race in the Turf Classic. So those are going to be my best bets for Saturday. And good luck to everybody.
Love it, Pat. Good luck to you as well. Noah, since he's a sicko, is going to give you the pick 4 that we talked about today. And then actually, they're both in the sequence today, which I love it. Race number 4, starting a pick 4, very deep in the first 2 legs and very skinny in the last 2. As we talked about, the Knicks go is very tough. He's going 1, 2, 6, 7, 8, 11. And then in the turf sprint, which we all know are mine and Howard's favorite type of races, he's 5 deep. He's going 4, 5, 8, 10, 14. Then in the Derby City Distaff, it's 7 or 10 for him. That is, of course, Alva Star and Vava. And in race number 7, the Distaff Turf Mile, that is either Evie Jets or Capiche. And then in race number 5, I talked about how confident he is. He has Mustache underneath to round out your exotics as one of his best bets. Noah, go ahead. Muty boy, strike. That's a co-host fail. Not even a host fail. Let's go.
I felt like it would be more of a disservice to people if I gave out picks for races that I haven't, handicapped to my sublime. Unfortunately, with finals, I haven't been able to go as many of the Saturday's races I would have liked to. So I figured since we're covering this pick 4 sequence, I might as well give out a ticket and another one as well. Starting with the pick 4, the first race, as we alluded to, I think is very difficult. Even though I'm against best actor in general, I've obviously got him on there. Fast forward to the next race, I'm 5 deep. Which race is that?
That's the turf.
We're all running together at this point. The turf sprint, obviously, I've got Mustache in there, Matorius, and a few others. I've even got Mischief Magic, who I am a little bit against, but I'm still using, as well as Big Invasion. And then in the last 2 legs, I'm going to try and go a little skinnier. I think it's probably a 2-horse race in the Derby City Distaff, so I'm just going to go with those 2. And then if I'm alive to the last leg, and Chili Flag is taking a decent amount of, action, and I'm alive in that ticket, I'll probably, play some maybe win money or doubles to try and back myself up there. And then going back to race 5, the turf sprint, I kind of touched on what I like about Mustache. If I think he's going to sit the trip that if he sits the trip that I think he's going to sit, it's a turf sprint. I think crazier things have happened. And
wow.
If you can get a bomb and you exact or try on a day like this where the pools are huge, I mean, it's going to pay exponentially. So those are my best bets.
Absolutely. Noah, good luck to you, my friend. 10-21 and says in the chat, you guys are going to be covering the Pat Day. We are not, but tonight, actually in an hour, Howard, Pete, and Paul will be covering a show on the late pick 5 for Kentucky Derby Day, starting with the Pat Day Mile, of course. So that will be there, but stay tuned in about 3 minutes because one of my best bets, if not my best bet of the day, comes in the Pat Day Mile. So stay tuned for that. Charlie, you are up next, my friend. 2 doubles. You're starting with race 6, 7-10 with 3. That is, of course, Alva Star and Vava into, as you kind of alluded to, your best bet, Chili Flag. And in race number 8, another, basically rolling doubles. You're going 8-12. That is Top Connor and Nash into the number 5, who I saw love in the chat for as well as one of their best bets, number 5, Legend of Time for Torian Appleby.
Yeah, I mean, look, if you want to put this all together and make a pick 4, you certainly can. I just don't know how much people wanted to, and I'm used to kind of, after Kyle taught me the ways of making my best bet double, so I stuck to it. Look, we talked about a lot. Obviously, there's other talent in this race, like 3 Witches and Red Carpet Ready, but the consensus I think we all kind of agreed on, as well as people in the chat, is that this should be another great showdown between Alva Star and Vava. So I'm not going to take the chance of picking one or the other. Why not just Dutch it and take both into Chili Flag, who again is a horse I've always been on. I understand the horse is going to need to continue to improve, but I think that will happen. I think Chad knows this is the right spot, and I think Irad's hopping on again because he knows this horse is very live. And then for my other double that I gave out, that goes right into it. Again, a common consensus amongst most people is that it's kind of between Top Connor and Nash, two very talented horses in still a very talented and open race, but certainly the two in the Pate that stand out. And I know, Kyle, like you said, you'll talk about which one you really like, but I didn't want to risk picking one or the other. And then play them both into Legend of Time, who, again, is a horse that we had talked about before yesterday when we were doing a bet that, again, I can't encourage enough in the chat, by the way, that people loved yesterday. That's cool. Again, if you don't know, everyone, there's the $3 $3
gotcha.
3-year-old pick 3. Because I know some people in the chat were complaining that there isn't the $3 turf pick 3, but they do have the all 3-year-olds one, which is, I believe, 8, 9, and 12 on Saturday. So 8, 9, and then the Kentucky Derby. And we kind of all talked about how much, or at least Noah and I did, how much we love Legend of Time. So playing into that horse.
Like I said, I love it. You'll see where I'm going with in this race as I bring up my best bets. I have 3 for you guys. If you guys don't follow me on Twitter at AP, I'll take this off at AP Roscoe K, which is right here on my name tag. I will be posting my full selections and best bets for both Kentucky Oaks and Kentucky Derby Day. So please follow me over there if you're interested. Again, at AP Roscoe K on Twitter. I actually already wrote them all out, and I just have to change them for scratches and changes. As I'm completely done with both days already. So I have 3 best bets for you guys this week, just to one up my good friends on the screen. Race number 6, I talked about it a lot. That's the Derby City Distaff. I talked about at length how much I love Vava in that race. Hoping for somewhere around 5-2 on that horse. Would absolutely love that. And off that last race, second off the layoff, really think Vava's got a really good shot to, as Pete Visco put it, flip the tables and take home the win in the Derby City Distaff. Vava is my first best bet of the day. Race number 8, excuse me. I have to change that because that starts in the Pate Mile. That is Nash. And I talked about it yesterday. And if you guys haven't watched it, we covered a great show on ticket construction, a little bit of tips on ticket construction, and going over sequences that maybe a lot of people don't know about. As Charlie kind of hinted at, there's the $3 3-year-old pick 3 in the Pate Mile, American Turf, and ending with the Kentucky Derby. There's an Oaks Derby double. There's an Oaks Turf Classic Derby pick 3, and we covered the Derby Superfecta as well. Go check that out. That was from last night, but you can still, of course, watch it as a replay on the HHH Racing Podcast YouTube channel. I've really disliked Nash, and that was at 2 turns when he was on the Derby trail. I really didn't like him, and I just didn't like the way he moved around 2 turns. That last race, guys, down in Hot Springs, at cutting back to a mile, I think showed a completely different side of Nash. He was able to wait and rate and step back. Granted, he didn't beat a whole lot in that race, but just visually, the way he was able to finally show that different side of him and sit back off the pace in what looks to be very fast in the Pate Mile. I love Nash in that spot. And if the speed does get away, I might play a backup with Top Connor, but Nash is probably one of my, if not the biggest opinion I have on the entire day. That is number 12 in the Pate Mile, paired up with the horse Charlie talked about, Legend of Time. I just think I'm not very keen on the 3-year-old American Turf runners right now. Legend of Time, coming over from England for Charlie Appleby, has run very good races, albeit not very fast on time form scale. But if you look at the different comments, it's easily. So all these races, it looks like Legend of Time hasn't been able to really show what he's truly made of, and now comes over to what, in my opinion, looks like a lackluster field and should be bet to sit a very nice trip. So I'm going in ice cold double starting in the Pate Mile, 12-5. And we talked about the Turf Classic yesterday. My last best bet of the day is a win on the number 1 Integration in the Turf Classic. Last time out, he really didn't show his best, albeit it was his best race on speed figure standpoint. Ran 3rd, but behind Master of the Seas and Naval Power, the 2 Applebees. Naval Power is in the Turf Classic. I just really like Integration, breaking from the rail. Tyler's going to have him sit in a perfect spot somewhere mid-pack and be able, as long as he gets a nice run, should be able to show what he's truly made of. And as long as he gets a good trip, should show what he's best at, which is a 1.125 miles, just like the Hill Prince he ran at Aqueduct. And Integration should be a pretty good price. I'm hoping for 5-6 to 1, somewhere in that range. So Integration is going to be my, longer shot win bet of my best bets. So good luck to anyone. If you guys have the same opinions as me, if you guys have different opinions as any of us on the screen, please comment below in the live chat or in the comments below. Of course, comment in the live chat. I see a bunch of people. Mike Monroe says his best bet is the last race timeout for Bill Mott. I really like that horse as well, Mike. That's a very astute way of thinking. So good luck to us with timeout. I completely agree with that horse. But however you guys have it, good luck with this Derby weekend. Like I said, this is going to be our last show before the actual Derby. As we all know, we beat it. We've talked about it time and time again. We have that future bet on Sierra Leone. Everyone on this podcast does. Hopefully we can get a great run coming home. I do agree with you, Charles B, though. Tusk to Touch is my second choice in the Derby. Sierra Leone, Just a Touch, Resilience, and then Catching Freedom. For me, if you guys are curious about our full Derby opinions, that show aired last Sunday. Last thing before we air off, check out Picks and Ponies in about 45 minutes. They're going to cover the late pick 5 on Kentucky Derby Day, starting with the Pat Day Mile and ending, of course, with the 150th running of the Kentucky Derby. To everyone out there, thank you guys all so much for the viewership. It's been fantastic all week long, and I'm sure it will continue to be all the way up through Saturday. But don't be a stranger. Subscribe to the HHH Racing Podcast YouTube channel and come back because, like I said before, racing never sleeps. For my co-hosts, Patrick Kunsel, Noah Maher, and Charlie Freeman, this has been your host, Kyle Roscoe, in episode number 76 of Bettin N Boozin here on the HHH Racing Podcast, covering all Kentucky Derby undercard stakes outside of the late pick 5. And to everyone out there this weekend, crush those bets, win those photos, and stay safe, everyone. Have a great Kentucky Derby week, and we'll see you in the next one. Take care, everyone.